Yes, and now I would like to give the word to the speakers, Maifong Collett and Figen Isgin, and to the moderator, Aurora Rodonov.
Vielen Dank, Denise. Herzlichen Dank to International Women's Space.
Yeah, thank you very much, Denise, and thank you very much to International Women's Space for being here. I got to know Denise in May in Cologne, where I live, and we carried out a tribunal called Dissolving the NSU Complex, where racism in Germany is being put into an action, and we had a workshop on sexism and racism, and Denise was there to talk about the struggles and present their work. And after that, we spoke about the holding a conference, and I was very delighted about her asking us whether we want to be part of it. And this is the reason why we are here today. Now, in the first panel, we will talk about guest workers and also contract workers in order to learn from the historical context, because everything that we experience today, the strong regulation of migration, racism, which has a long history in Germany, but also the struggles within racism, the subjective practices of us and many women, and also, of course, men. We really want to look into history and look back how things were in the 1960s, 1950s, when the so-called guest workers, the women, came to Germany, to the Federal Republic of Germany, and also when the contract workers came to East Germany. So in the first panel, we will somewhat reconstruct how that happened, when these women came, because that was a very regulated migration. There were many women who came to Germany through different paths and not through these kind of recruitment processes or contracts that East Germany had done with other countries. And I'm very delighted to have our two speakers here. Maifong Collett, thank you very much for being here. And Figen Isgin, I'm very happy also that you are here. A warm welcome to you too. Now, both women are living in Berlin, and they come from the same generation. In the mid-1960s, they were born, and Maifong came as a contract worker to East Germany as a young woman to Germany. And we are now going to talk about your stories, really. Now, before I say something about the recruitment policy and the history of contract and guest work, I want to introduce our speakers. Maifong was born in Vietnam, and as an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old who had just finished school, she came to Rostock, to East Germany. She worked as a trained chef, so-called cook, and this is not what she actually wanted to do. She wanted to work as a financial assistant, and this is the first history that we're going to talk about. What are the expectations and what happens when you get here? However, you managed to realize your dreams, because later in the second educational round you studied. You are now educational worker, and you are very committed to in the integration work, and you are an intercultural trainer or coach. And today in these sessions, you have people who you've met as racists, such as policemen who were also looking away during the attacks in Rostock-Lichtenhagen. And these people are now forced to come to your diversity training sessions. My phone is not only an intercultural code. With her story, she also started to work artistically, and she is playing at the Gorki Theater on the play Atlas of
im Gorki-Theater. Und da geht es eben auch darum, deine Geschichte zu erzählen, wie du hierher gekommen bist und was du hier.
There's a play at the Gorki Theater where my phone is part of and tells her story. Now let's come to Figen Iskin. She was also born in the 1960s in Kars in the east of Turkey. In 1979, when she was 14, she came to Berlin. Her father was here already. He came already in 1969 as a guest worker. He went back. You went through different school system. You went school in Istanbul and then back to Germany. And with 14, you remained in Germany. You went to secondary school here in Germany, and you studied. Also, you are also diploma pedagogue. And I'm very happy that you both today are passing on your valuable experience, how also you managed to realize your dreams. You are working today with unemployed people as a social worker and are helping them on their way. As a woman, as a mother, and as a migrant, you are saying that it is absolutely important to contribute to the struggle against racism, against social oppression, and against exclusion. And for many years, you've been politically involved and you were, for example, a stewardship at Siemens, and later on you were also very involved in left politics as part of the Left Party. Now, yesterday we just had a preliminary conversation, and we three had a lot to say to each other. We actually wanted to meet for 1 or 2 hours, but we ended up sitting together for 4 hours and really thought that we needed a lot of time. So this session is just a small contribution to see how through this very restrictive regime and this whole restrictive perspective on migration and refugee, how is it possible to fight for your own rights and to go your own way and have a better life here in Germany? I would like to say a little bit about the migration history and will ask for the first slide. This is just going to be a small outlook or overview of how things happened in the 1960s. Now, in the 1960s, we had the so-called recruitment agencies. Now, this is a picture from my family. My family, or my parents, came here in the 1960s as guest workers. They were from Sicily. They came to Germany from Sicily. They wanted to stay in Germany for 2 to 3 years. However, they're still here, so they remained in Germany. In 1965, there was the so-called recruitment agreement between Italy and Germany. And the classic picture is that the male migrant, and you know all these pictures of seeing a male man with suitcases coming to Germany. However, there were also a lot of women who came as guest workers to Germany. They didn't come so much from Italy. They came back later as a family reunion, but the Greek women and the Turkish women came alone, and they became the breadwinner of their families. At the beginning, the recruitment was a bit difficult with Italy, so the so-called agreement with Spain, Greece, and Portugal, and the Turkey and ex-Yugoslavia was decided to be done. And through the Eastern policy and integration, it was a strategy to do so, as also the agreement with Turkey, because Turkey was already in NATO as part of was part of NATO, and there was an agreement to have agreements with these countries. There you see a picture from the Ford strike. The recruitment was regulated and limited to a certain period. People were supposed to come here for a certain period of time and leave. I read a poem which I liked very much, and a Turkish woman is saying that ideally, they probably wanted us to go back at night and work during the day, and remain invisible, have no spare time. But of course, this did not happen. What's the name of the poem? Let me look it up. I haven't got it with me here. The poem is in the book Foreign Home and Near Home from the Documentation Center and the Museum Center here in Germany. It was part of an exhibition, but I can look it up if you want. So it was a conscious strategy to make these people invisible. But as we have seen with the Ford strike, migrants very soon, despite the recruitment stop, which was introduced in 1973 because the government said, oh, we have an oil crisis, let's stop the migrant workers. There was also a lot of xenophobia emerging, so an agreement was supposed to be concluded. So in the year 1973, there are a lot of strikes. There are about over 200 strikes, and a very prominent strike which was led by women is the strike at Pierburg. It's a company in North Rhine-Westphalia in Neuss. Is the speed okay? So I'll try to speak more slowly in case interpreters are not able to follow. There was a strike, really, where women were fighting for eradicating the easy wage group. Now, the women were obviously used in the low-income sector. Of course, the male guest workers were getting less than their German colleagues because they were used below their qualification. However, the women were in an even lower wage group, and they were fighting against that and conducted a strike. And at that Pierburg strike, for several weeks, in spring and in August for a week, these women mobilized also their male colleagues and also the German colleagues. And they were able then to eradicate the low-income group. Okay, let's look at a small clip from the strike. This clip was created during the strike. Many people showed their solidarity and fought together with the migrants. So this is not a clip of two authors, of Edith Marcello and others. Many others filmed also. This movie or documentary is 59 minutes, but we are showing 1.5 minutes from that documentary.
Ein bisschen Sound.
Okay, let's get some sound. So this is just a short impression from that strike. The women are demanding for money. This is what they are calling more money, more money.
Story
Das war's schon.
Right. So this clip is 49 minutes, and on the internet you can have a longer clip if you are interested. The film is called Your Struggle is Our Struggle, the Peer Book Strike. Now, in the 1970s, as I said, there was the recruitment stop. However, the population is increasing, and the federal government has founded another measure, which is the assistance to repatriation. So basically, the idea was to give migrants money to go back. Some migrants go back, others stay, they become self-employed, they start their own lives. And when we look into the history and the NHSU complex, then these are exactly the people who have been who were attacked, people who started their own business. And despite having experienced racist attacks, and despite the fact that in the 1990s there were many attacks in East Germany, but also in West Germany, in Rostock-Lichtenhagen, in Hoyerswerda and Möll, the migrants remain and continue to struggle. So we can learn a lot from that to really stay and show solidarity for those who are fighting against racism in Germany. In the GDR, the situation is similar, however different. In the 1960s, agreements are made with the so-called socialist brotherhood countries such as Angola, Cuba. There were also agreements with Hungary, Poland, and other countries. And there, this whole regime is more regulated. For example, couples cannot live in the same residential complex. Women are not allowed to become pregnant. In Western Germany, the pregnancy tests were made, but in East Germany, sanctions were much harsher. Women were deported when they were pregnant, and there were also forced abortions, and the couples were also not supposed to obviously procreate. Now, the problem was also that agreements could be cancelled from one day to another, and the people were able also to be deported in East Germany. Now, despite the fact of all these restrictive regulation, many people stayed and started to have their own lives here. Some people moved to the West, and we've seen a quadruple and marginalization against these people. And there were also a lot of examples where people were fighting to stay in Germany, and there was also a lot of solidarity that was shown between the migrant workers in the East and West Germany. Now, Figen, I'd like to start with your story. As I said, okay, slowly. Let me come back again. In 1979, you came to Germany. Your father was already in Germany. And what is your story? And the title of this conference is When I Came to Germany. What is it that you found here when you came to Germany? And how did you guys in your family decided to come to Germany? And what did you know about Germany prior to your coming to Germany?
Aber wenn man bei Aua sagt, langsam, dann muss man mich, glaube ich, 100-mal daran erinnern, dass ich, ja bitte, dass ich langsam sprechen muss. Es klingt mir oft nicht so gut. Also bevor.
So, as I said, so please give me a sign if I will try my best. But you know, you know, when you talk about migration, immigration, it's something that has always existed in humanity. People have always moved out of the country. And up to the First World War, more than 6 million people migrated to the USA. And also in Turkey, there are more than 5,000 Germans living in Turkey. So I don't know why people claim that it has never existed, but we do know, and we have this information. It's not something that is typically German, and not typical, something that is typical for the people who are living here. What shall I say? Let's have a chronological overview. On the 30th of October 1961, this is the fourth country, as I think, that has signed such an agreement, recruitment agreement. There was a high level of unemployment in the Turkey, and that was something like save the life of people. So to say, the Turkey wanted to send their people away to Britain, and they were supposed to stay only for 2 years using a rotating process, and they should bring back money home from Europe, in generally speaking, and from Germany, so that the country could speed up in terms of development. Well, I said it, but I would like to mention it or to illustrate it, because this is something that is hardly told. There were 800,000 people coming from Turkey, and around 150 people were women. That is, the women came also first. And Turkey is supposed to be a backward land. This is what people claim. But you see, there were women who had never wait to go out of the country, and suddenly they found themselves in Germany, and they've made it all. They stayed there, and I know the stories of many men, and after 24 hours of hard work in a factory, men have left, but I've never heard of any woman who just went through this kind of hardship and went back. Women were divorced, or they were not married, and because the man did not pass the first test, and the women came, and then they brought their husbands and their children to Germany. About my own story, my father came 1969 to Siemens, and then came my mother and 3 of my sisters and brothers. There's this, you see here a picture with, you cannot see my mother and my sisters, and this is my mother, my elder sister, my youngest sister, and my brother. They came after a few months, and the other sister stayed at my grandfather's place. And after that I came. I went to the second degree in Germany, only for Turkish children, and the teacher came as well from Turkey. So it was not about learning German. The children were just packed away there because both sides thought that the children would come back after some time. So I was sent back by my mother to Turkey, because it was not an easy situation for my mother with 5 children. She had to send us to the kindergarten, and she had to use a low wage in order to be able to live. And this is why, after 1 year, the decision was taken to send me and my sister back. My grandma said, no, she cannot cope, and I was sent to Istanbul to my mother's side. So if you have a closer look, this is an immigration to a foreign country, then immigration within the country, because these are two sides of the same country. So I had to start with elementary school. I went through that, and my parents decided to come back to Turkey. Then I started again in another school. I think it was 2 years, and then my father could not cope any longer. Then he went back to Germany, and I had to go to a boarding school. So I've changed school 8 times, 2 countries, 2 different cities, different school, friends. I'm not alone with this kind of biography. There are many people, women and men, who went through the same thing, and I think many managed to settle here. For the last time I came, I was 14, 1979, and we could attend some German classes at the Volkshochschule. Then I was registered at school. I was enrolled. I was 16. My sister also came and was enrolled. But I also was enrolled at school, but not as class for foreigners. And then I found it again that it was the class changed the name, only with Turkish and Kurdish school children, with a teacher that came from the Turkey, which was called now preparatory class. And I was the only one who managed to come to a normal, so-called normal German class. And then I managed to get a certificate, school leave certificate. So during that time, during these 2 years, I managed to went through the German school system, and whatever came after school leave certificates or university, I had never had any kind of counseling. I saw once somebody from the job center. That was the only kind of counseling I've ever had. And my parents didn't know anything about the school system, and it's also the case nowadays. Many people who have lived for such a long time here are facing a system that is very complex. They don't know it, and many Germans also have these kind of problems. And they say that the education system as well is giving people several chances. You can move upwards, it's true, but you have to know about this system. You have to inform and counsel somebody at an early stage in order to be able to manage. So my parents wanted, as anybody else, to go back. That was everything. That was something that was always present in their mind. And after 30 years, it had not changed. You know, just an anecdote in order to illustrate that. One of my friends told me he had to repair, to transport a carpet, the same carpet 4 times between Germany and Turkey for his mother. This is the way we were living. And the plat from that time, you could see it either under the beds or over the wardrobe. There was everything that was packed for returning to Turkey. So my father said it doesn't make any sense to start with higher education. They're actually still there, and you have the the grandsons and grandchildren still have contact to Turkey. I decided to work. I started at Siemens. I was recruited straight away because unemployment was something that was unknown at that time. You could find a job straight away and you could earn a good living as unskilled people, worker at Siemens. So together with me, in the 80s, there were many young people from the second generation Turkish people, who were employed at Siemens, at this factory. They were unskilled workers. Some of them could speak good German, some of them could not. And we started to work until the beginning of the 90s. And after the German reunification, the factories have modernized a lot or didn't manage and started with mass redundancies. Of course, were not laid straight away because you had a job employment, but you were paid compensations, which were supposed to be attractive. And then if you didn't want to go, then the people say, okay, you have to go to Nauen. Or people said, oh Lord, that was supposed to be in the former East Germany, where there were a lot of attacks, like in Rostock, and where people are really hosting so many right-wing people. So people actually could work at Siemens as long as they were work. But as the situation completely changed, then people had to leave the factory, and some people managed to find other jobs, for instance, by the transport company from Berlin. So a few words about Siemens, and after that we will talk about maybe something else. At the very beginning, on the first day, I joined as well the trade unions, but I didn't actually understand it well. I'm not coming from a family that is politically organized at the highest level. So I was a member of the trade union, and I was just paying my fees. But after that, I realized what I'm doing here. This is just a hard work. And the money that I got was really hardly owned and earned, and that was sometimes very difficult. There was also the language barrier. And 3 out of 4 people coming from the Turkey were at the work council. There was a young man who was actually a member of this work council. And many of them and many others saw we were women, and there were some kind of women's gender-specific, women-specific topics, and we became more acquainted, more familiar with the country, and we were not only want to work as an interpreter, so I acquired some qualifications through the qualifications of the IG Metal, the trade union for metallurgy, and then until I left Siemens until 1995. I was a member of this work council. I wrote a text as well on Turkish. That was also something for Siemens. People came from the Turkey 61 and 72. There was a change in the work laws, and for people with a migrant background could become as well work council. 72, there was a change in law so that people could become a member of the work council as well with a migrant background. And when I enjoyed mother protection, there was somebody with a Turkish background, and on the list of IG Metal, we cannot find any place for us, and we put up a list with our own candidates, and they were very successful, and they managed to get into the work council. And these young men of my generation were laid down. Their memberships were cancelled, and there was a lot of struggle. And then they were re-employed. That was not easy. This is an example that shows that migrants, women migrants, were also struggling, especially in a country which is foreign to you. You have really to fight for your rights. Thank you very much for what you have described. Thank you for what you have described. Shows that the structures were not made for people to stay, acquire qualifications, and for children to be able to have a space and to be able as well to organize within the trade unions. And that is an issue that was also one of the core issues for the migrant communities. I would like to come to you and to explain the story in the German Democratic Republic. What happened? What did you find when you came? What was the accommodation situation in those days in Rostock? Before I start talking about my history, I would like to say something. Dear women, dear sisters, dear grandmas, dear mothers, I'm so thankful. I'm so touched that I have this possibility, this opportunity to sit before you, to share my history with you. I've stood before an audience and during conferences, but it's the first time in my life that I've experienced this kind of conferences organized by women, for women. And my feelings are going ups and downs. I'm so touched. At the same time, I noted that when I go, I have the impression that, I feel so home, and it's so It's such a deep feeling. Each time when we meet, we cry. Actually, we burst into tears. And my mother said it, "Oh, you're just crocodile. You are shedding tears all the time." I knew that today there would be so many refugee women among us. And I selected the pictures accordingly. There are so many topics that are so relevant today, wherever we live. Even before the picture with my father, is it there? I was just 1 year old, 1.5 years old, and my father made a picture just before he had to go to war. And I got to know him when I was 9. He was very deeply wounded during war. And for us and for our family, that was really something very positive, because the war lasted until 1975, and he had started, if he had continued to fight until that time in the jungle, we don't know whether we would have come back safely. So that was my childhood. There were some migrants movements, but of a minor kind. My sister is just 1.5 years younger than we. And what we remember from our childhood is the bicycle, and one of our uncles brought us from one foster family to another one. We lived in Hanoi, and when the Americans would have met us, they want to strike the capital, so to say, the very nerve of the country. So if people want to work in the factory, they have to stay in the production and stay in the capital city. Women and men, as well as children and families and grandparents, so that the parents stayed in the factories, and the children and the elder people, like the grandparents, were sent to the country. So my mother had a brilliant idea. We were sent to different families, so if a bomb would fall down, if one child is killed, then she would have at least one other child that would be staying alive, because it was brought to another family. This is why I hate departure until now. I don't like to take leaves, and I don't like farewell. I know what it has meant for her, and I know what it means for everybody, this kind of farewell. And 1975, that was the end of the war, and we came back to Hanoi. And how it was with the German Democratic Republic at school, we only had one side of the medal of the history of Germany, because Vietnam is up to now a socialist country, so we only knew that capitalist is an enemy. Everything that has to do with the other Germany, Western Germany, is something very bad. And we were taught that people from East Germany were good. I stand in front of the embassy of East Germany, and I thought, oh, I want to go there because the people are good. And up to the age of 15, I didn't associate the term of foreign with anything else than that, because there was even a partition of Vietnam. Up to April 75, were not allowed to go to Laos, Cambodia, China. And then there was an agreement between the two countries. I was 17. I just left school. I applied for a medical university. And then came my mother. And you know what we said about the Turkish migrants? I belonged to the first 20 women who were allowed to go to Rostock. And I think that there was a reason. My mother was a party cadre, and people were expecting to earn a lot of money. And for the people who are part of the party, they have children, daughters, and 20 of us were selected. Many of them came after to Leipzig, to East Germany. And in Rostock, we were the very first 20 women. And my mother supported me and has sent me away. That was very difficult for her. But I think that my family and the other families of the contract workers, each of them preferred to be 5 years long separated from their children because they had some hope. They thought that we would be coming back with a lot of wealth, a lot of money. And we were really checked in such a way to be sure that we were not suffering of any illnesses, that we were not pregnant, that you were under a certain height, but not too small. None of us were taught any kind of German work, and I was so proud when I entered the plane on the 27th of July, 1981, because I had now a job, and my mother was one of the party cadres, and I was supposed to acquire a lot of knowledge, and I was supposed to come back in order to participate in building up my country, Vietnam. And we arrived, and there's something that we found very strange as women. We didn't master any kind of a single word of German. And all the people who were deciding about our fate and deciding about what we had to do were men. Our group leader was a man, the party cadre was a man, the interpreter was a man, our kind of tutor for the group was a man, and we had children at home. And from the first time, and we didn't know what it meant, we were checked by the woman's medical doctor. We were really checked by the gynecologist, and people wanted really to know whether we were pregnant or not. And at that time, it was very, very unpleasant for us, because it's we have a very strong Confucianist culture, and unless you are married, you are not allowed to have sex. And we were not married, and we had to go through this examination, and there was only a curtain separating us from the interpreter and the medical and the gynecologist, and he could hear everything. And this interpreter took care for us for the coming 4 years, and we had to take the pill, and we had to look at the package, and we tried to find out what it is. And at the end of the day, you told us already there were all kinds of regulations that we have to obey to. You need to have the right attitude, as it was called. You had to work hard, and you have to break records. You had really to limit yourself to what was said. You should not learn too much German, and you should definitely do not have contact to the overall German population. At the end of the day, we were in the middle of this society, but at the same time, we didn't know anything about the Germans, the way they live, the way they work, and at the same time, we were completely separated, because the accommodation where we were separated through a kind of protection wall, so to say. But at the same time, this was the way that was used for the people to voice the kind of oppression they were suffering. So at the beginning of the 90s, we were confronted with unemployment. The redundancies were also on the agenda. But at the same time, there was so-called a solidarity between the nations, that with all these celebrations that were organized, but later, we were told that the German Democratic Republic brought you here, but why you're still there? It doesn't exist any longer. We were called Fiji's. We are not called Vietnamese, but, in a despective way. And we were told that you have to really to leave, or if not something happened. You asked before. Maybe I could also answer. You said it in a very strong way. There were so many regulations, and there was a double kind of oppression and double kind of exploitation. Were called as labor. And you had at the same time this political kind of agenda, which was not explicitly explained. And there are in between also moments where you fight, where you resist. That was possible in West Germany with the strikes, but in East Germany as well, you had resistance. So how did you manage to organize as migrants, as women especially? And what is the difference between the time before German reunification and after reunification? In the German Democratic Republic, there were also people from Angola, Mozambique, most of them men. How was the solidarity movement between the migrant women in the German Democratic Republic, in East Germany, in West Germany, and with the other colleagues? How did you resist all these kind of regulations? What about the structures? You have been also members of various structures or organizations. You're in the Association Almende. You have a particular perception of women's workers.
I just want to add one more thing. It's not that Turkey sent the people here to earn money. They also had a task that was given to them from home. The historian Karen Hoon writes in her book, and this is what I read also just recently, and it's stated in the brochure which people who came from Turkey received from the Turkish government. Now, the federal government of Germany is a nationalist state. The people living there, just like us Turkish people, they are nationalists, and they are also enemies of communists. So it basically means that the guest workers had a political task to remain silent and not get involved. So not to organize oneself. And also, we were also not supposed to report sick, only in really big exceptions. So this shows how many of the people came here to Germany. A lot of these people stuck to this, and they did not get involved. They just didn't want to have any problems with the government here in Germany, but also they did not want to have any problems with the Turkish government if they went back. However, there are also other guest workers who did things differently. In my preparation to this conference, in 1965, in many cities in Germany, the so-called people's houses were built. People's houses are not only places where people meet for tea. It is a meeting place for men and women who talk about politics in Germany or elsewhere. So there are already political meetings that were taking place 4 years after people arrived. Now, these self-organization of migrants became very strong in the 1970s, especially here in Berlin. These organizing groups emerged through coverage, really. They were sort of like underground. They worked together. They also improved their German language skills. They got involved in German politics. Now, after the political coup, when a lot of politically active people from Turkey came to Germany, these political organizations became stronger. And some organizations were founded to also continue their party political work from Turkey here in Germany, because in the 1980s, a lot of these guest workers believed that they were going to go back to Turkey. And Aurora already said that that was also the political intention in the 1970s, of course, but also in the 1980s. 1980s, the former Chancellor Kohl said that I will reduce the number of the Turkish people by half. So every second Turkish person in Germany was supposed to go back. So in this repatriation bonus that was offered by the federal government of Germany, there were about 350 people who made use of that repatriation bonus. The others remained, even though people did not want to believe that they had to go back. They realized that somehow things have to change here because the children have started to grow up here. So these associations, these Turkish associations, started to become more involved within this German society. In the 1990s, there was the Turkish Association Berlin-Brandenburg, and they operate across parties and saying that primarily they want to improve the living conditions of people here. There was also the Turkish Parental Association, where I was also part of this organization and also sitting on the board. The reason for that was because of my own personal autobiography and also as my work as a counselor and my work at Siemens, I realized that a lot of young people in third generation had similar problems. They leave school without a school qualification or have a qualification which they can't do much really compared to other German students. And even if they had some kind of qualification, they were still being marginalized just because of their name, because they are called Mahmed or Ahmed, and because they are visiting a school in Kreuzberg. And unfortunately, it's the same case today. The efforts of the parties also here in Germany did not made much use, because every fourth Turkish child does not have a school's qualification. And also the situation is still that despite having a school qualification, there's still not many opportunities for this target group. So I decided to fight for this target group. Back then, the PISA study, which is an educational study, was published where various European countries are being compared in terms of their educational system. So I then got to look into what is happening in schools, and I realized like a migrant student really does not have an opportunity. The school as an institution was basically not functioning properly, and that is a problem. Now, Figen, you can maybe say a little bit about the Turkish Parental Association. Given the structure that we have, which are racist, also in history, we also saw that the Spaniards and the Greek self-organized and to give their children the opportunity they had, and only through that were the children able to have some kind of upward mobility. And Fitkin, can you just tell us what is it that you guys are fighting for, and what did this parental association stand for? Now, I'm no longer part of this association. However, it was founded back then. Why? Well, the Turkish language, and I just want to emphasize that, there were a lot of people who came from Turkey. However, all these people who came did not speak Turkish as their mother tongue. There were Kurdish children who did not speak Turkish. Therefore, the idea was to improve the Turkish language skills of these children. Now, when I joined this association, that and what I wanted to fight for was to improve the situation in schools. Of course, you can have some kind of political demand, and the the Turkish Association conducted some projects. And there were also others who helped the families with issues such as education, apprenticeship. There was also the attempt to look at racism in schools. And only when you get involved, you really realize that racism is already experienced in primary school. Children, and if you don't have children or are not involved with children, you don't know, because newspapers are not reporting about some kind of racist attacks. However, in such parental associations, parents come and talk about such incidences. So, and when you talk about them, then you are shocked, because until then, you have not realized how deeply rooted racism already is in schools. So we were fighting for native language courses and also support. We are fighting for more teachers. Now, some districts in Berlin, they want to cancel some kind of agreements with teachers, but these classes are very important, because these classes are classes where the children are taught Turkish, and I think such classes are important, that they take place in a school. And this is something what the Turkish Association was trying to really resolve, so that the funding is given for such issues which I consider important. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let me just answer your question. Now, before reunification, there were no self-organization, because we are not allowed to. We were also part of the trade union federation. We had to join whether we wanted or not. However, it was sold as if all Vietnamese contract workers wanted to be members of the trade union, and our membership was even deducted from our wage, whether we liked it or not. Now, my commitment and the reason why I'm the person I am today. Now, I've been living here in Germany for the last 37 years. And there have been two profound experiences which have shaped me immensely. The first one was after reunification in 1990. A lot of unemployment happened. A large portion of my fellow Vietnamese people went back to Vietnam. They took the 300 euros that were offered to them. However, I was able to stay because I was married to a German person and had a daughter. Now, my German husband said that let's open a restaurant. So what we did was then we took a rundown building which nobody wanted, and that was also something that we could take for 5 months, and we then started to really put a lot of energy in that building or restaurant, and I was the only visible foreigner. And the guests who came to our restaurant were about 80 to 100. there were all of a sudden 25 neo-Nazis who were there. They were screaming some kind of Hitler slogan. They were saying, Germans for the Germans, foreigners go out, Fijis go out of the country. And this was so appalling to see that the Germans onlookers were looking away and nobody did anything about that. Now, 3 weeks later, I was alone in the restaurant and I just thought that this can't go on like that. This will really destroy me and my business will go bankrupt. I'm a woman, I'm small. So what would happen to me if these people were to fight with me? So what I said, I went to these people and I said, go out, what do you want? I'm not going to let you defeat me. I know many people said to me that, wow, you are very brave. But today I would probably be cautious of suggesting for people to do that. But because it's very dangerous. But I needed to do something because I was alone and the pain was still very big. One of the people there, the neo-Nazis, said, wow, look at her, she speaks very well German. And then they left. However, 2 weeks, some of them came back, some of these neo-Nazis. And I said to my husband, oh my God, today they're gonna demolish our business. However, these so-called neo-Nazis were queuing and wanting a Coke or a Fanta, so they were very humble. And I was even given some tip from some of them, like 57. And some of even uttered some kind of apology. And they started to grow their hair because first they were skinheads and they also became regular guests, really. And only about 3 months later, we saw the incidents of the Sonnenblum House. I saw these images that I saw also during the Vietnam War. I went to the Sonnenblum House, and luckily I was not there when 120 Vietnamese people, among them many pregnant women and babies who had to free themselves, really, while up to the 7th floor, the house was already in flame, and the population was just onlooking, blocking the way for the fire brigade to go through. The police was not assisting, and people were just looking on as people were somewhat struggling for their life. And while some of my fellow Vietnamese people had to rescue themselves, they were crawling on the floors, like there was absolutely no human dignity there. And in this 11-story building, these Vietnamese people tried to go from door to door to leave the building. However, there were only 2 people who opened the door to let these people escape. For me, I was very lucky not to be part of that. However, a few days later, I went to the Sonnenblum House, and in this 11-story house that was so once filled with life was completely empty. It was very silent, very quiet. And for me, I thought that, my God, I would have never believed that Germans are capable of something like that. And the second thought that I had was, my God, my fellow Vietnamese people are gone now. They are gone now. And I thought that they were all deported, and I felt very lonely. What am I going to do? Where will I go? Therefore, I always laughed myself silly when they said to me, why are you here? But I said, now I'm going to stay. It's my right to be here, and you will listen to my story, and I'm not going to allow you to kick me out. And this is how I then decided to found our association. So we hid for about 2 months and came back and founded the association. The main reason for the association is to offer protection for ourselves, because we were absolutely without any protection until the 1990s. We were completely controlled on both sides by the Stasi, by the Vietnamese government, and before reunification, or just after the fall of Berlin Wall, everybody basically was able to attack us, and we are also being blamed for all sorts of things like cigarette smuggling. And for many years, we fought for the right to stay, and especially taking into consideration also the years that we've already spent in Germany. And 9 years after reunification, the first contract workers were then able to get a permanent residence permit in Germany. And this is when people thought that, okay, now I can start my life, I can bring my family, I can get children, and as I said, start my life here.
Vielen Dank. Du wolltest noch was?
Thank you. You wanted to add something, and maybe a last round so that we can open up the floor for the audience. I didn't know that I had so little time. There's something that is really very important to me. This is the creation of a self-organization of migrants. A woman said how they occupied so many houses in Berlin, how she supported so many women from Turkey. The first generation of Turkish women, together with their children, they have occupied a house and they have lived there. This means that they have really be involved in social life here. I think that this phase was very important to me, but also what happened in the 10 years where I was active, and for the other years in Berlin, because we made significant contribution. We started a campaign saying that integration ? No, thank you. Because everybody was talking about integration, but if we have a closer look, there's so little that is happening when we talk about integration. According to our understanding, so little is done to make it possible. To us, it was clear that this campaign aimed at making people think, what is integration? Is it what we want, what we wish for? Do we have enough money? Is it part of the political agenda in this country? And you see this also nationalization after 1999. Many people who took on this German citizenship had to answer questions with these tests, and we prepared our own tests where we have also examined all these questions, where we made fun of all these questions. We worked together with other women and men, and we initiated the first major Festival Against Racism in Berlin. So this work in associations is being carried on by other people. In Berlin, for instance, some of the friends are here. There's also Coalition Against Racism. We were parts of it. We were the first ones who came down to the streets 2011 as it was known that these 11 people from the Turkey, from Greece, and one police woman have not been assassinated by their own people, but by a neo-Nazi circle. It's very important to be active at political level. There's much to do against racism, but at the same time, we should not delegate our own agenda to political parties with the expectation that they would act. We should really take the things in our hands and move things ourselves. Thank you very much. I thought important as well to show this again, this historic photograph in order to illustrate this political struggle. Despite racism, despite alienation and marginalization, there were always moments in history when solidarity is really practiced, where something very concrete is also initiated with the women's space, with the occupation of this school. This was something that we've known as well in the 70s in Frankfurt Est as well, with in the inhabitants of particular neighborhoods in order to have access to kindergarten. This shows that many things that are also be part of laws, most of the time for Europeans, not for Turkish people, were the outcome of grassroots struggles, that a social democratic movement from grassroots can really make history. And you have to learn from this struggle and continue them. Now we would like to open the discussion. Maybe we have 10 minutes, 15 minutes to have an exchange with the audience, because we started a little bit late, and you can also tell your own story, ask questions, or make comments. So is it with the microphones? This one can be passed on. Does anybody want to say something? Somebody would like to take the floor? Hello. I would like to thank you for your story. It's not easy at all to share this kind of stories. And as for myself, it's so interesting to hear from you that Turkish women came. I always had this picture in my mind, and what is shown on television, that these men came and were given something as a present. And I've grew up with these kind of pictures, and I always have these pictures in my mind that the Turkish women had to always go along with their men. And you can see how this falsification of history take place, and I thank you very much for your struggle. I would like to thank you for for using this as a topic, especially for women. They have the courage, they made a contribution. These are the people in this society and in that system that are facing so many hindrances. After 52 years, we still have this image of the poor Turkish women with the scarf on their head. And they are just, living in bondage, under the rule of their man, their husband. If you decide to identify with this image, you can do not something else. Or the German would say, it's also like here. It's possible to be both. I went through this political work, and because I'm still somebody who is also learning from the street, I've been a candidate for the Bundestag, and I've been really supporting other people. I've been having stands on the street. And never again I can say that people don't want to accept this image. Is it a Turkish woman, 30 years old, is actually making political work for a political party? And somebody was interested, this 30 years woman was interested, but it has been also educated differently. It's not easy to overcome all these barriers.
Thank you very much for sharing your stories. And I have a question regarding contraception and the forced abortions, which I didn't know about. How did you get that kind of access to contraception, especially when I think of Poland, the abortion laws are currently being discussed. How was the access to contraception? And you talked about that a little bit. Did you have to pay for contraception? Can you just say a little bit more about that? I'm interested in. Okay, I forgot to mention that actually earlier. I mean, the idea was not to have kind of a family policy, even though couples were able to come to Germany together. They were then separated here in Germany. One was put to a factory in Berlin and the other one in Rostock. However, they were not supposed to be together and live their love, so to speak. Their entire energy was supposed to go into production, into factory work. I also mentioned earlier that without any kind of education and information, we were taken to a gynecologist, and we were then, as a preventive caution, given or put on contraception. At the same time, given that we had Vietnamese group leaders and party leaders, we all, or in our community, it was clear that sex before marriage was not possible, and women were then separated from male workers because the idea was to prevent that from happening, because they knew, of course, that if men and women are mixed, then this will of course happen. So the contraception was given out as a preventive caution, and it was done in such a way that we had to go to the group leader and ask for the contraception, but nobody dared to go and ask for contraception. So that was done intentionally. We knew, however, that we could not become pregnant, and if we were to fall pregnant, we would be deported. So what it meant was that we then engage in secretive abortion. And we women also said that we don't want to take some kind of chemical drugs. And some women who aborted, they were using the contraception form spiral. And the topic of contraception was a topic among the trade union, and the trade union said that we need to resolve a problem. There are so many women who are sick and they are missing in the production work. On average, 4 to 5 pregnancy disruption happened because women did not take kind of drugs. Also, women who were married, of course they have sex, and it is normal to have sex if you live here for 5 years. It's just it's an ordinary thing. Okay, let's take a few more questions. Okay, this question will be in Arabic. Yeah, good morning. My name is Saina Pamod. Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you very much for your stories that you shared about your lives and how you arrived here in Germany. I come from Syria, and I came to Germany due to the war in my country, and also due to the difficult situation. I lost my family. Now, for the last 4 years, I've been living in the diaspora. I don't have a home. And I have a friend, and her husband lives in Egypt. However, for Egypt, a visa is required. And my friend is missing her husband. She hasn't seen her husband for 4 years. Thank you very much for sharing. And maybe in the break we can talk to one another a bit more. However, thank you very much for sharing. Also, welche Sprache?
I can speak in Arabic or in English and little Deutsch. Okay, I will speak in English to let the majority understand what I want to say. I want to thank you very much for this conference. It is very important for me to be among such great women and to be in a conference which is organized by women. For me, this is very important. للتعريف نفسي، أنا شادية عبد المنعم من السودان. الحقيقة أنا ما لاجئة، أنا جيت مع زوجي للعيش في ألمانيا من 2 سنين، ويعني
I come from Sudan. My name is Johnny Abdullah, Sudan. And 25 years ago, I completed my academic studies in Prague. I'm an activist, I'm an activist for human rights. Of course, topics such as migrant women, refugee women, women as victims of violence. In my country, we say that being a woman
يعني قمة العنصرية موجودة في أي مكان طبعا، سواء كانت في ألمانيا أو في دولة تانية. Eva is horrible and terrible because there is adding value to that she is a woman. And I want to say that the stories which I hear here, for me, like by the end of the day, they suffered double because they are women. And I know that the rules and the laws are patriarchals. يعني I will turn to Arabic to express myself more. نحن كنساء نعاني من ذكورية المجتمعات، ذكورية القوانين، ذكورية
Yeah.
Arabic. I will speak in Arabic to express myself better.
Okay, that's what I did not understand. You don't need to translate yourself because they translate.
Yeah.
Okay, so one language, please.
Okay. نحن كنساء نعاني من ذكورية.
A problem is that we are suffering from patriarchy in society and suffering from discrimination and exclusion. What I noticed is that refugee women, when it comes to the asylum laws around the world, especially the asylum laws in Germany, one could actually know that we are talking here about refugee women, and there are also people suffering from other issues. For example, in Sudan, in my country, there is a dress code. We are forced to wear the attire which the ruling system is imposing on us. If not, we are receiving lashes, and Sudanese women are suffering from this form of violence and discrimination and racism. These women then come to Germany, and then they are again faced with laws which do not consider their needs, and they suffer from a racist system. The women the women who talk about the violence that they have experienced, it's absolutely important that we hear their voices. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak on this conference. And I really hope that we, as a unity of the feminist women group, that we work together mutual feminist togetherness and also compassion. Let's fight together violence and measures against women. For example, in Poland, I took part in the demonstration against the tightening of the laws concerning abortion. Also, when it comes to other issues, we should work together. Also, issues not only concerning women, because all issues that are racist have a double effect on women. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, let's take two more questions. Yeah, thank you very much for your wonderful contribution. I have a question to Mai. What's the cooperation between Vietnamese women activists and autonomous white German movements, women movements? And secondly, how is the cooperation between you and movements against racism, such as women of color and women with migrant background and black women? Well, this is a very sore spot that you've touched upon. The situation is rather poor, really, I must say. We hardly have visible people who express themselves publicly, and that is the problem. And this is also something that I've been criticizing publicly. On the one hand, there are historical reasons, because the Vietnamese community in Germany is very divided. We have, on the one hand, the children from former contract workers, the so-called communists who were taken to Germany. And in West Germany, we have the so-called boats people who fled from the communist government. They were the ones fighting for the Americans or were pro-Americans. And then we also have this very, very strict controlled, the strict controlling of lives. Because when we came here, we hardly spoke any German. And then fighting against this inhumane measures was not something that we were brought up to do. We don't come from a mentality where you really fight. We rather come from a mentality where you smile, you remain invisible, you are always kind, and through that you hope that you're not going to be attacked. However, we look the way we look like. Everybody addresses us, and everybody has the feeling that they can really attack us with libel affronts, and we are Vietnamese and look the way we look. We have experienced a lot of restrictions. I cannot, however, give you any meaningful movements. If these arson attacks would have not happened, we would have not even founded our association, because the intention was not for us to be autonomous. The Stasi didn't want that, and the Vietnamese government did not want that either. They didn't want us to be independent and even fight for our own rights. Now, the majority somewhat accepted all this. Okay, unfortunately, we are running out of time and have to stop here. And we have, however, the opportunity to continue our conversation during the break. And of course, we also have to have lunch and stuff. Thank you very much for your patience. And thank you very much to you, too, the two speakers of the first panel.
Just do